And there it is, my friends. What a game. Wow. This game was an absolute adventure. What a ride, what an adventure, what a thrill. Absolutely fantastic game. Tremendous. I had such a good time. Woo! It really did live up to it, man, I have to say. Really, really enjoyed myself with this one. That finale was really nice and bombastic as well. And literally riding off into the sunset as well. Lovely. It had it all, man. It's rare where you feel like a game, as like a sort of third-person action-adventure game, has it all. And it feels like this game really did. It had a bit of everything, man. It really did. Amazing game, I have to say. I feel like it's got to have some kind of like post-credits scene / like checking out some of the things that's now available. So I'll probably wait until I give my like full kind of closing thoughts here. Take a little bit of time. Yeah, so this is like a short... Oh, okay. For a second all the names disappeared and I was like, is this just a short one? I think it might be though. Even these credits, the way they put it together is pretty cool. That's like the most fun I've had in like a third-person action style game in years, I have to say. It has been years. I'm trying to think back now, like, I don't count stuff that's like more open world, so like God of War Ragnarok feels fairly open world. Like Horizon games, like Forbidden West and stuff, well, that one is open world, that kind of thing. Is this the credits continuing, or... it made like a little seamless transition into the amber. So Ada achieved her goal. Here we go.
Patch me through. I've obtained the amber.
Excellent.
Just one question. What are you planning to do with this?
I do not pay you to ask questions. All you need to know is a new dawn is breaking. 100 will give their lives so that just one may live. I am expediting that change.
So, we're talking millions of casualties.
Billions.
How ambitious. We're changing course now.
Wow. There it is. Okay. Ada came good in the end as well. She had to. She really did. Okay, so these are like the full-time, the final credits. So I think I will start talking about the game at this stage, because this will probably be a fairly long credits. Amazing. Really, really good. I have been blessed. I said it right from the start, man. In recent times, I've been blessed with some absolutely amazing games to play. You know, I've been a video game fan for so long. I always enjoy video games fundamentally anyway. It's not like I ever have a really bad year of video games. But the last like 12 to 14 months has been absolutely brilliant. And this one is right up there with the best of them, man. I have to say. It immediately, I put it up there like in the category of some of the best like Uncharted games. I would say like Rise of the Tomb Raider was a game I really loved, maybe more so than the average. Like, it reviewed really strongly, but a lot of people don't talk about it as much, and I thought Rise of the Tomb Raider was a fantastic game. Like, this one is in that strong, really strong range. Like, in terms of its genre, like the more like third person, more linear kind of style of gameplay, action adventure, it's got to be one of the best of its class. Basically, it was such a journey, such an adventure. It really was. It set out to really give you a thrill, give you a ride, give you an adventure. That's exactly what it did. It delivered on almost every front. So this game, 100% like legendary. Now, thinking back to 2005, in general, what I know is that I think this game is similar enough to the original. It's not like they completely changed it in like a massive way. So imagining this in 2005, it must have blown people's minds. And even today, it's like with this remake, it's worked out so well that in 2005, like, yeah, it would have looked different. I think the gameplay would have been different, like a little bit and stuff. But the ambition and the scale and the philosophy of the project, it's so unlike any Resident Evil that came before it, and it could have all gone wrong. It could have definitely all gone wrong. They could have like deviated too far from the original style and sort of methods that they used and design philosophy that they had, and it could have like backfired, but it didn't. Resident Evil 4 is a legendary game for a reason, and this remake really did deliver. It's carrying on the legacy of one of the best games of its era and of its genre of all time. So yeah, just very impressed. I had high expectations anyway, because I knew that they knew how to do a good job from Resident Evil Remake 2. They knew what was necessary to make a fantastic remake. And I've always said it, with Resident Evil Remake 3, I just don't think they gave it the time and the resources for it. Or they could have made that game as good as Remake 2, potentially. But with this one, I really felt like they knew what was at stake, and they knew the mistakes from the third game, and they knew what they did right from the second. And so when the base game is already so good, the blueprint is so strong, to me, this is what remakes are all about. You have a strong blueprint, you have a legendary game, you have all of the ingredients necessary there to sort of give people who love the original a way to re-experience it again while feeling so familiar, but still having a modern day experience. But then the game is so strong anyway, and because you are modernizing it and remaking it, you're bringing in a lot of first-time players as well, and it achieves all of that stuff. And I think Resident Evil 2 Remake definitely achieved that. I mean, it sold over like 10 million copies or something. And I think this one is going to sell really well too, because a lot of the OG fans are obviously going to be showing up. It's still the game that they know and love. I'm pretty certain that, of course, there's always going to be some bunch of people that are going to really like not be happy about certain elements, or like, I mean, I don't know specifics obviously because I've not played the original and I didn't want to spoil myself about anything, but I've heard like phrases like they've censored some things that were in the original, for example. Sure, I mean, obviously it's never going to be a one-to-one, and there are going to be elements of it that people don't like, but I am very confident that the large majority of people who love the original are also going to really enjoy this one. And so I think it really does deliver on that front. And for people playing this game for the first time, you don't really need to know what happened in Resident Evil 1, 2 and 3. I think you can just come into this and have a hell of a time and really enjoy yourself. So yeah, for me, like as a quick like thing, it is up there with the best of its genre. And it's so hard for me to compare it to like the best games I've played recently, like, I don't know, Elden Ring and God of War Ragnarok and that kind of thing, but it's just strong, man. It's up there with the best of them. It really is. It's I wouldn't say like it cracks like my top 5 or top 10 kind of thing. I wouldn't say that close, but it is very close. It's like it's knocking on the door. If I had to give it out of 10, I'd say maybe like a 9, I think. 9.2. On Metacritic, I think right now, the first day of reviews, it was like a 95, and I think at the moment it's like 93 or 94. And I think that's kind of fair. For me, it's like between like 90 and 92, which is by no means like a bad score at all. It's a generationally good score. Like usually the best games on a given platform are in that sort of 90 range and above. And so yeah, I mean, it's definitely in with a shout of being that. And anyone that says that this game's a 10 out of 10, I'm not going to really argue with them. Anyone giving it lower than like an 8 or like any lower than like a 7.5, I think I'd be like, that's harsh, man. Like, you probably fundamentally don't like Resident Evil, or you don't like third-person action adventure if that's the score you're giving it, because it just does exactly what it should be doing. And so yeah, overall really strong game. I think, as I've been saying throughout the playthrough, just the sheer ambition of this game really blew me away. I just was not expecting this at all. I really wasn't. Like, I really still imagined it was a more like contained game. Like, yes, it was a different kind of setting from 1, 2, and 3, but I still thought it was going to be more contained than it was. Like, the sheer amount of different areas, different types of locations, the length of the story, the length of the game, the amount of content they put in the game. You're talking about like Resident Evil 3 Remake or Resident Evil 2 Remake even. You couldn't tell me that there was more than like 10 types of enemy, 8 to 10 types of enemy. In this game, there were tons, absolutely tons. And it felt like it had enough content to be like 3 games in one. I've spent over 20 hours playing it, and I felt like I played like 2 or 3 Resident Evil games worth of game here. And so that aspect of it is probably the single most surprising thing for me, I think. Now, before I continue, let's have a final look at this. Mission accomplished. So yeah, nearly 22 hours. Wow. Hey, not bad. At least they weren't too harsh on me and they're like, oh, you saved 65 times, you get an F immediately. But yeah, I'll take that, man. I'll take that. So yeah, I would say of that playtime, maybe like 50 minutes of it was just like idle time, where I might have like left the console on and like done things in between. So I'd say about 21 hours for my first run, which is a lot, like I say. When loading main story save data from a completed playthrough, you can carry over the data and start a new game. You'll be able to purchase new weapons from the merchant, but you cannot achieve an S+ rank. Okay, I mean, that's not the end of the world, is it? Nice. So back to main menu. Ah, the title screen changes a little bit. Okay. Unlocked costume, pinstripe. Sunglasses, round, foam mask, flight cap. Professional mode has been unlocked. You can select the game mode when loading, save data from a completed playthrough, or when starting a new game. Bonuses, extra content shop. So you can get all of this shit. Extra weapons, apparel. Complete the main story in professional mode with an A rank. So yeah, there's a lot to do here. Challenges. Sheesh. Well, there's a lot to do, man. Credits full vocal version. Okay, yeah, I think I will just leave it on this title screen while I talk about the rest of the game, because we've got some music in the background and some visuals, so I think that'll work. So yeah, like the general scale, ambition, size, and just like sheer, like almost budget and resources used in this game was just absolutely blew my mind. 2, I would say the pacing and the momentum of the game was really strong. Like it was 22 hours, but it was an action-packed 22 hours. And as I say, like nearer the end, it was getting close to feeling like a bit too much, like Uncharted 3 kind of syndrome. But I think it ended at a good point, and I kind of reached my limit with it. So it wasn't so long that I ended up saying, okay, this is too long, too many sections, too many hordes, too much of the same thing, too much repetition. Fortunately, for me at least, it didn't get that far. But it was by the after about hour 17, 18, it started to get into that kind of territory. But I mean, the sheer amount of different scenarios that you were put in, like the variety of the boss battles. Like, yeah, we had a lot of the classic Resident Evil kind of big monster in a relatively small arena. You have to shoot weak points. Even like the final boss was obviously that type. But then you had the fight with Krauser. Like the first one was knife only. The second one was like a bit more of a standard fight. But then you had the little section in between where you had to do his little kind of challenge, like assault course thing, and he's attacking you in between. You had the sections with Ashley. A lot of the game you had a companion with us that we had to protect, and there were a lot of intense sections with her where we tried to keep her alive and that kind of thing. Just the amount of different scenarios that we were put in. The bit where we had the boat and we had to go to a few different points to collect certain items and do certain things. Just like the shooting range, just there's like 3 or 4 games in one in this game. It's just absolutely mind-blowing for me. I just was not expecting this. I really wasn't. So yeah, massive kudos for that. I mean, the amount of content and the momentum and the pacing, I think, were some of the best aspects. The gameplay, thanks to the merchant, and everything they did with the merchant was really smart. Like, even something as simple as, we've got a lot of weapons in this game, and we know it's going to be hard to pick, and it's difficult once you've invested into leveling up a weapon to kind of give it up and try something new from scratch. So like, no, we're going to give back most of what you spent on the weapon so that you can more freely transition between weapons and just try them out without having to start from scratch every time. It's simple, but it's very smart design. So that stuff was really on point. The gameplay, like the variety of weapons that you had and things you could do with them, the gunplay, the amount of enemies, the different ways in which you could approach it. The gameplay was definitely like I would say not leagues ahead, but just a massive step up from what I'd experienced up until this point, like all things considered, I would say. I think the general, like, because of the sheer amount of different areas, they were able to tick so many different boxes without feeling that it was kind of just doing it in service of the old games or because they felt like they had to. It felt very natural to me, like the different locations we visited and the things that we did in those locations, the way that they flowed. I wasn't kind of thinking that this is padding or this is kind of unnecessary or, you know, whatever. It was all very well designed and tight and well done. Some of the puzzles were definitely fun as well. Yes, definitely less, I think, puzzle-centric than some of the older and maybe some of the OG style Resident Evils. Definitely a strong action focus here in this game. Like, even more so than I expected. I was told, like when I was saying about the earlier Resident Evil games, where it was much more about like conserve your bullets, don't try to kill everything, all that kind of stuff, or like, you know, these zombies are taking 7 shots to the head and they're not dying. What's the deal? People were saying to me like Resident Evil 4, I think, is going to be more up your street. There's a lot more. The zombies die more easily, and they want you to be like, you know, fighting your way, and they want the action. They want you to be clearing out areas. And you saw there was almost no points in the game where I had basically 0 bullets for everything. I think there was one section near the end where I had, like, if I had 6 weapons, I had 0 bullets for like 4 of them. But even then, I still had a few left over in case I had to face something. That also helped to just keep you rolling, keep the momentum. It kept you strong enough, but it kept the game challenging enough, where the difficulty I felt was really nicely balanced as well. Because of the amount of autosaves and save points available, even if you are dying quite a lot, it doesn't throw you back that far. And so the standard difficulty, I think, for a newcomer was really on point. I personally liked it. I do think it's on like the more difficult end of like a standard playthrough spectrum. It is quite tough for a first-time player, but I personally really enjoyed it. I mean, I somehow went deathless for like nearly 5 full chapters, and then as soon as we had the Luis section with the Horde inside that little building with the 2 floors, then it just started to ramp up. And then every chapter I was having like a death or 2, or like 3 to 5 tops. And in general, I thought that was really well balanced as well. So just the gameplay design and the way that it was implemented across lots of different locations, I thought was really excellent as well. Definitely enjoyed that a lot. Visually, I think the game looked great. Compared to the original, I think it's of course a nice remake, a nice step up, while not trying to sort of completely reinvent the wheel. Again, the different variety of areas, like the interior sections versus a lot more of like the foresty, mountainous regions that we had. I thought they were all kind of well designed. Did it like absolutely blow me away visually? Definitely not. I think that's one of the areas in which it's not, to me, it doesn't really compete with, say, Horizon Forbidden West or God of War Ragnarok. I think those games are a step above in terms of like the visual quality. But I would say, like, of course, like art design and general look, I did really enjoy it. It's definitely really good, but not like S tier. I would say it's more like A tier, like A minus for that particular part of it. But when you combine it with like the always excellent sound design and music from the Resident Evil franchise, every area that you went in, whether you were exploring or whether you were in an intense battle, there was always some kind of like correct feeling and atmosphere to go with it, using the combination of the visuals and the music and the sound as well. All of that stuff was just really well done, as it has been for the entire franchise, and this game also continued that trend as well. Like I said, the boss battles I thought were really cool, lots of variety. Pretty challenging. Like some of them I did die maybe 3 or 4 times at least. Other ones I managed to do first time, but I felt like they were pretty well balanced, and we got a nice like different amount of challenges too. The story definitely picked up. At first I found like I did think it was too slow personally, especially because I'm used to the shorter Resident Evil games. This one being this long again was just not expected for me. I mean, I'd heard 15 hours or so, but I didn't think it would take me 21. So that's why like the first 3 to 5 hours, when there was relatively little story going on, you weren't finding that many documents, and it was kind of a basic sort of head into the village and find Ashley, and there wasn't too much more about it. I was like, this is really slow, like I want to read more documents about what this like plague is and what the situation is. But by the time you get towards the end of the game, it really unlocks a lot more, and you start to obviously spend more time with Ashley. You have the section with Louise, you have Ada obviously making her cameos and all that kind of stuff. You learn more about Sadler. You had the section with Ramon, so a lot more sort of started to come into it, and all the documents that accompanied it. I felt like I generally understood the story and what like the plague was, where it originated from, what the bad guys wanted, what they were trying to do with it, what does Leon want, and what does Ashley want, and all this, like what does Ada want, all this kind of stuff. And so yeah, I feel like this the story stuff, again, it is Resident Evil, and so it's never gonna be like, you know, I would say like Uncharted games probably do that a little bit better, where they don't have a very deep story. But I think the writing is so sharp in the Uncharted games, and the characters themselves are very charismatic, and they have like a wider cast of like cool characters. In this one, you've got Leon, who I thought, like, for the genre and for the Resident Evil game that it is, he was fantastic. Absolute legend. I mean, some of those one-liners were just brilliant. Even stuff like 99 Nights I thought was hilarious. The one-liners against the bosses, you know, all like the kind of action hero stuff that you would imagine in a good action flick that you're just going to have some fun listening to and just, you know, playing as. So I thought Leon was excellent. I had a really fun time playing with him as a protagonist. But like overall, again, like in terms of the story and the storytelling and the characters, it doesn't reach that like A tier. I would say it's like a B tier, I think, for that kind of stuff. Leon himself, he's like an A tier. He's an A plus tier for the genre. But as like a whole complete thing, I still think Resident Evil is never going to be that game for me where like I get that invested in the characters or the story or anything like that. So that's why I think overall as a franchise, as much as I've loved Resident Evil, and it has genuinely become like a franchise I'm a legitimately that I am a legitimate fan of, and a big fan of some of the games especially. It's never quite going to be at that level of, say, a Metal Gear for me, because the stories of Metal Gear, yes, of course, they get a bit convoluted and wacky and weird sometimes, but overall the storytelling and the style of MGS, whether it's storytelling and its characters, for me that's always going to be obviously superior to Resident Evil. And because it's something I value highly in the games that I play, that's something that will always keep Resident Evil like a bit below the likes of MGS for me. And that's just obviously a completely personal thing, because I mean, Resident Evil's not trying to tell like a really important, deep story that you're going to be thinking about for like days and weeks after you've played or anything like that. It's just, it's basically, to me, it's like Hollywood movie, like Hollywood popcorn movie style storytelling, and it works really well for the game and for the genre. So I have no complaints about it. But if you're wondering, let's say, is Resident Evil 4 one of your favorite games of all time? No, it's not. And that's one of the reasons why, for example, it wouldn't be. Like, there were just so many times in this game where it was just a classic, find Ashley, you fight through, you find Ashley, either just when you find her she disappears again, so they give you like a double find Ashley, or you find Ashley, she spends a bit of time with you, she gets taken away again, find Ashley. So there was a lot, like that side I think was definitely repetitive, and they did do that a bit too much, and that's the kind of thing that stops me from giving it like close to a 10 out of 10, based on like what I prefer. And so that's one of the things where it falters a little bit on. I was disappointed with Ada, I'm not going to lie. I get what they did with her, like she was almost like this guardian angel type that's been watching over the whole thing, and she just comes in and like snatches what she wants right at the end. And you can tell she still kind of has some kind of care for Leon, but her biggest priority is to her job and to, her role and that kind of thing. And so, yeah, I get all of that stuff, but I would have loved, I really enjoyed the playable section with Ada in Resident Evil 2, and the interactions that they had together, I would have loved to have seen some more of that. Like, at least give us one chapter where they spent the chapter together. Either like we did with Louise, for example. If Ada had a Louise-sized role in the game, I wouldn't have had a problem at all. But for me, I think they cameoed her a bit too much, and she just kind of swooped in like randomly for like 30 seconds, was all like sexy and cool, and then just left again. And I think they kind of overdid that aspect. So I did expect more from Ada, not going to lie, especially considering how freaking long the game is and how much content there is. I was sure that they were going to give us something more with Ada, like a playable chapter of some type, or some like more in-depth like companionship throughout the story or something. But they chose to use her in that particular way, and that's fine. But for me personally, again, I do wish that Ada played a bit of a more involved role in the story and the action and the storytelling as we play through the game. So that was another thing that I do wish was a little more catered towards my personal interests. But yeah, overall, I think I'm going to start to wrap it up here. Really had a great time, and I'm very glad I got to play this one for release, and I am very glad I'm a fan of Resident Evil after all of these years. So yeah, I'm a bona fide fan of the franchise. I mean, it's been 4 games now. It's never let me down, and I would say of the Resident Evil games I've played, this is the best one. I think for me, it's most suited to my personal taste. It's not like leaps and bounds better. I wouldn't say it's like, oh, it's easily the best, like way better than all the others. It's just a slight step ahead. I think it does everything a little bit better. Like the other ones are more refined experiences. I think they are more kind of what I imagine Resident Evil games to be. This one, to me, I mean, I said it at an earlier point in the playthrough. Sometimes it just feels like I'm playing a different franchise. Like, swap Leon with, like, I don't know, Nathan Drake or with Lara Croft, and it wouldn't go amiss. But with Resident Evil, like the earlier ones, if you did that, it would kind of look weird. This game didn't have that, and so that's why, like, it's not. I don't put it that far ahead because it does kind of, in a very, very minor way, it quote unquote loses points for deviating that much from what I know from Resident Evil, but not enough to not make it my favorite game of the bunch, if that makes sense. So if it somehow managed to do all of this while still being even more of like a kind of core Resident Evil experience like the first 3 were, then maybe it would be far and away my favorite of the bunch, if that makes sense. So yeah, because I am fundamentally, like, my background is more third-person action, the games I've been mentioning, so the Uncharted series, of course, The Last of Us, MGS, obviously they're varying degrees of action-adventure, but you get what I'm coming from. The Tomb Raider reboot series, that kind of stuff. I'm so used to those games, and I enjoy them so much. This one was, of course, that perfect fusion of Resident Evil plus that kind of Tomb Raider-y Uncharted feel. And so that really spoke to me, and that's why personally it's probably still my favorite of the bunch. But I will forever have an appreciation for, like, the OG. Well, I call it the OG, but it's the remake of the OG of Resident Evil 1 that still has a very kind of old school kind of feel when you play it today. That one, like, because it was such a novel experience for me, and it's like, it still is like the quintessential Resident Evil experience. That one I still rank very highly. And Resident Evil 2 Remake was also fantastic. So just a very strong franchise of games so far. But I think of the bunch, Resident Evil 4 Remake probably takes the biscuit. So in the future, I might someday be curious and try like the OG and see how they compare. But I'm so satisfied with my time playing Remake that I'm kind of Resident Evil'd out for now. And I will say that the only thing that I'm kind of concerned about at this stage is that Resident Evil 4 feels like the last great Resident Evil. One where, like, people are putting it in like their all-time lists, and it was one of the best of its generation, all that kind of thing. From here on, it is downhill. Now, there's always, again, there's going to be those people that are like, oh, I love Resident Evil 5, or like my favorite's Resident Evil 5, or 6, or 7, or whatever. But I think it's a pretty clear consensus that anyone that considers themselves a fan of the franchise, if you ask them which is your favorite game, the amount of people saying 5 onwards is going to be very low. And so that's kind of unfortunate, and to be fair, I am curious to see where it kind of went wrong and why people stopped enjoying it. And I'll most likely be in the same boat, but I would kind of also like to go through that experience and see what changed, because they were really onto something. I mean, they deviated from like the original core style of Resident Evil, I would say, in this game. And they nailed it, like they got it right, man. And so from here, what went wrong? Like, what did they try to do? And did they try to bring it back to like the original classic Resident Evil and it kind of failed? Or we're just going to have to find out, because obviously I'm curious to play Resident Evil 5, but I will be taking a break because I've literally played Resident Evil 2 Remake, 3 OG, 3 Remake, and 4 Remake in the space of about 7 months. So I'm like Resident Evil out for now, but I will be making a return with Resident Evil 5 most likely in the future sometime, so do definitely look out for that one. So I will be saying goodbye from this series. Thank you all so much for the support. Resident Evil, one of the main reasons you're seeing so much Resident Evil on the channel is because A, of course, I'm enjoying the series. I think that much has been clear at this point. But B, because the response from the community has been so great. There's of course a lot of Resident Evil fans out there, and a lot of them kind of align with the Final Fantasy community as well. It's a community that I didn't think had that much crossover originally, but based on how the series have done and the general feedback I've got, there's a lot of people that have a lot of love for Final Fantasy, but that also play a lot of Resident Evil, or that have played a lot of Resident Evil in the past. So I want to thank you all so much for the support, and these series have generally performed better than the likes of, say, God of War, and they've all outperformed Horizon Forbidden West. So it's clear to me that there has been an interest in these games on the channel, and I will continue to try and bring you guys more from this type of genre in the future. So I will sign off with that. Thank you all so much. Shout out to everyone on Patreon that continues to support these playthroughs. You guys are a massive help, and to all of my channel members as well. Appreciate you guys too. You really do help to keep the channel moving in the best possible way. So I will sign off with that. I will see you soon. Take care.